A social media post claiming that rapper Sexxy Red is a CIA operative went viral on Saturday, March 29, 2025. It was initially shared by @DailyNow, which has over 50,000 followers. The account attached a screenshot of an apparent article which said that Sexxy Red has been working under the code name agent Bow Bow since 2018. Of course, many of us will quickly dismiss that story as being just another silly conspiracy theory. And those who does so will perceive themselves as being the more rational and intelligent ones among us for doing so. That's actually a socially engineered response. Those who are quick to dismiss the Sexxy Red story are unaware of the true underlying relationship that presently exists between the government and its Black population. Under the objective of just merely preventing Black dissent from rising among the Black masses against the white establishment, given the white establishment's long-standing history of mistreating its Black population, there are in fact many nefarious, unethical, clandestine operations that are being secretly deployed against the Black population. The reality is that at the highest levels within the government, there's no one seated at the table looking out for the interests of the Black population. We have no representative speaking in our behalf. Therefore, everything being implemented is for the interests of preserving the system of white supremacy. This fact remains true regardless if we have a Democratic president or a Republican president. Both parties are unrelentingly committed towards the preservation of its nation's system of white supremacy. The only difference is that the Republicans are more blatant and the Democrats are more covert. Both parties are like two wings of the same aircraft, and the aircraft is a system of white supremacy. And regardless of what the public might think, both wings works vigorously to keep the aircraft of white supremacy flying high. During the 1960s, President Lyndon Johnson and FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover both determined that the African Americans population were the greatest threat against the preservation of the nation's system of white supremacy. This is because during the 1960s, African Americans unified Black protests against the U.S. system of white supremacy was unprecedented. African Americans confronted it on all fronts. It was confronted through civil disobedience tactics, militant means, nonviolent protests, and with Black lawyers pleading for equality within America's highest Supreme Court. African Americans' unified protest still remains unrivaled by any other group in U.S. history. The government responded to this declared threat by deploying many unethical systems against the African American population. This returns us to the Sexxy Red story, because these nefarious tactics included often using Black celebrities that were handpicked to negatively steer the African American culture. After the assassinations of our true Black leaders during the 1960s, white social scientists knew that the Black masses would then perceive Black celebrities as being our informal leaders. They then started using Black celebrities to negatively steer the Black culture. Most people naively believe that the media reflects our reality, but in truth, it is more often we that imitate what we see and learn from the media. A group's identity is greatly shaped by how they repeatedly see their group being depicted within the media. People often becomes those media depictions of themselves, even the derogatory ones, that they've accepted as being their true reality. Therefore, those who controls a people's media images literally control their culture. It's a true social science known as media social engineering. Because the white society controls the media images of Black people, this fact allows white oppressive forces, particularly white social scientists and white propagandists, to negatively steer the African American culture. Their ability to steer the Black culture through media social engineering is extremely effective. We Africans in the US are more susceptible to negative media social engineering because we have been totally stripped of our true identity and culture during the enslavement of our ancestors. When these white social engineering scientists creates trends and customs for our Black youths to imitate, they deliberately create those that gets our Black youths acting and dressing as caricatures that reinforces resentment and anti-Black prejudicial perceptions. Moreover, those images that reinforces many negative and racist stereotypes about Black people. Black youths become those caricatures of the derogatory images and stereotypes that they accept as being their reality. It's the true reason why millions of African Americans now self-identify by the N-word, call our women by the B and the H words, sags our pants, and glorifies pimps. They changed us from calling ourselves brothers and sisters because doing so unified us. So now they changed us to calling ourselves by the N word and the B word because this makes us easier to be divided. Presently, it's the white-controlled hip-hop industry that is being used to continuously negatively steer the African-American culture. However, white oppressive forces started implementing these negative changes to the African-American culture many decades long before the hip-hop industry was even created. It was originally done so by using the movie industry. Most people think that movies are made for nothing more than entertainment. That never was the case. The greatest social messages are promoted through movies. Social norms promoted through films can influence the way of thinking and the cognitive map of a populated audience. In a normal conversation, when using logic and facts, your guard is naturally up. But when you're watching a movie, there's no debate. Your guard is down. The sensor part of your brain is not in action. It isn't saying, yes, I agree with this, or I disagree with that, like you would in a conversation or debate. When you're watching a movie, you're actually in an alpha state, being completely downloaded with ideas and images. This programming system was used to convince millions of Black people, Black movie watchers during the 60s and the early 70s to now call ourselves by the N-word. Those Black exploitation films were well received by the African American population during the 1960s because they provided them with a cinematic Black heroes on the silver screen in portrayals unseen in most Hollywood pictures prior to that time. Therefore, African Americans flocked to the theaters in droves to see themselves being represented as heroes on the big screen. Many Black audiences believing that those fictional movie characters were a true, accurate representation of our group as a collective whole began imitating what they saw in the movies. Many Black people became those derogatory media depictions of their group that they accepted as being their reality. But even far worse than they did than the derogatory caricatures that they changed within the African American culture. What's even worse is how they fundamentally changed the culture in ways that protects and serve the system of white supremacy. They did so by deploying an ideological subversion system against the African American population. Ideological subversion is an offensive psychological warfare tactic that uses disinformation, misinformation, and unrelenting fraudulent propaganda campaigns to change a targeted population in ways that are against their own interests and instead in ways serving those who are deploying the ideological subversion system. It's an essential tool in information warfare. They changed our culture. It changes from unanimously agreeing that white oppressive forces were our worst enemies to now millions of us are insisting that we're now our worst enemies. It's how they changed us from being able to implement the most successful unified protests in U.S. history during the 1960s to us now being more divided than any previous time in U.S. history. They also changed our culture from perceiving men like Martin and Malcolm X as being our heroes to now our heroes being athletes who now sign contracts forbidding them from speaking publicly about Black liberation. They've also changed our heroes into rappers who gets up on global media platforms perpetuating the worst negative stereotypes about our racial group. Through this process, they've removed Black liberation from our collective consciousness. Through this process, they've changed us from yearning for Black liberation to now only wanting a comfortable position within the system of white supremacy. When you open your eyes and look at all facts objectively, it becomes clear to see that the African American culture has fundamentally changed from the way it was in the 60s. And these changes are in ways benefiting the system of white supremacy. It's always by deliberately design whenever the oppressed population changes in ways benefiting their oppressors. These noted changes within the African American culture were deliberately achieved by deploying an ideological subversion system against the African American population. What it basically means to change a targeted population's perception of reality in such an extent that no one is able to make any sensible conclusion to come together in the interest of liberating themselves. This is the truth of our plight and condition. It is what they keep our minds dumbed down from seeing, dumbed down and distracted. This ideological subversion system is being deployed against the African American population in response to the unprecedented unified Black protests of the 1960s. It's how white oppressive forces subdued it, and it's how they ensure that it never happens again. Welcome to the real world. One love and peace.